Hello, this is Tannlin from the Tannlin's Take blog, but I'm also known as Jarl from the guild Brains and Brawn in Vanguard. Jarl here is my principal crafter, and today I'm going to use Jarl to demonstrate how to properly set up macros to simplify the crafting process. Okay, there are 6 macro commands that I normally use when I'm crafting, and I use all 6 of them just about every time I craft. Now, I'm going to take for granted here that you already know what a macro is, but if you do not, it's just a command that you put into the game that executes an ability or abilities in a combination or in a sequence that you decide. Okay. The first crafting macro that I normally use is called refine set recipe. Drag this over here to show you what it looks like. It says refine set recipe, all one word, and then a space, and then the name of the recipe that you'd like to use. I've already pre-programmed my macro command to do limestone thestrin bricks. So when I run over here to the shaping bench where I make my bricks, I click it and one button and it automatically finds the recipe for me without me having to go through into my recipe book looking for it. I just click the bench, hit one button, and there it is. Now, I still have to manually click the begin to go on to the next step, but that first step is just so much simpler than having to go looking through my recipe book and scrolling down and did I find it yet? Did I find it? Oh, at the bottom, didn't see it, so we go back up. Oh, thestrin limestone bricks. I just click it and bam, I am ready to go. Now, the next macro command I use is refine add item, and what that does is it allows me to put my crafting utility consumables onto the table without having to manually go through and pick each item to put on the table. Now, right here I have up how the macro looks. Refine add item, all one word, then a space, and then the name of the item. Now without the macro, what you would do is you'd click, brick, and then put your limestone in there, and then your solvent, put your solvent in there, and then your emery, put your emery in there, and screw that. That's not the easy way. What we do, we hit one button and you can see at the bottom there, it went and it put all of them in there for me automatically, and I'm ready to go. So if I'm flying through a bunch of recipes really quick, I can just go click, bang, click, bang, click, and I'm ready. Now, some of the newer crafters are commonly asking the same question, which is, how do I know which utilities to use and which to put onto the table, which are better than others? And unfortunately, I need to do some research to find out some of the best ones to use. I will, however, give you some hints to make you make better choices yourself without having me to make a guide for you. And this work order recipe right here, this batch of blue sapphire oval windows, right here it says utility solvent, utility emery. Both of those two I need when I make this work order. Now if I go to that limestone bricks, it says I need solvent and emery. So knowing that, what I could do is I could go into my macro and I could put that solvent and that emery as the first 2 items on there. That way they're always getting loaded in, and then any extra stuff gets added in on top of that or after those slots are filled. Alright, so one other word of warning is the first time that you log into a character and you begin working on a work order and you add the crafting utilities automatically using the macro, it sometimes won't take this stack of 25 solvent. It will take this stack of 10 solvent beneath it. It doesn't always pick the most filled one first. Now after that first try, it'll normally pick the 25 stack instead of like a 10 stack here. But that first time you do it, you need to double check and make sure. And then every time after that, you probably don't need to make sure, but keep an eye out to make sure that you're not running out of utilities. Okay. Now this next macro is a little bit more complicated, and I'm going to explain what the macro does before I explain how we use it. Now what this macro does, as I drag this over here, crafting, select step, and then a number. That's crafting select step, all one word, then a space, and then the number. Now, when I begin working on this crafting item, whatever it is I'm working on, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps in the crafting process. Now, if I hit this demo button that I've set up that says crafting select step 1, what it does is it pops up the first step. It shows me all of the actions that I can use in that first step. Now, since the first step is the brick step in this particular recipe, what it's showing me when I hover over is that the first action is 15 bricks, and the next one is 1 brick, and then the next one is 3 bricks, last one, obviously, 5 bricks. Now, the second demo that I have right here is crafting select step number 2. Now, that shows me all the actions that I can use on the second step. Now, the second step I can do anytime along with the third step after the first step is done. You can see that the different crafting steps are separated by this little dot. They're kind of bundled together. So I can't move on to this 2 and this 3 until number 1 is done. And then I can't move on to number 4, 5, or 6 until 1, 2, and 3 are done. So knowing that I can go to any step I want with one macro command really makes things easier to use. Now, if I tried going to like crafting step number 2 using the macro or manually clicking on it, and I click on some of the actions before this first one is stepped, it will not let me do it, and it'll show me that I have an error. Now, the next macro command, when I use with that first, the macro select step command, allow me to manipulate the system so that I can really push through these work orders using my macros really quick. Now, obviously, if you haven't figured it out, the next macro is crafting select action, all one word, with a space and then the number of the action that I want to use. So on this one right here, we just went over it, that the 1 brick right here is action number 2. So if I had 2 macros, I could do like a crafting select step 1 and then a crafting select step 2, and that would get me kind of through it, but there's an easier way to set up your macros so that you can just go right flying through these work orders all in one step. And I'm going to show you how that's done right here. Crafting select step 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, counting all the way down to 1, and then crafting select action 1, or 2, or 3, or 5, or 6, whatever. Now you're going to do each of these 6 times, and one will be crafting select action 1, and then a 2, and then a 3, and a 4, 5, 6. And if you look at my crafting bar right down here, you'll notice that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're already laid out on there. And once you get a little bit of practice, you'll start memorizing, and you'll start automatically knowing, just like a touch typist, what button to hit to get your next step done. Now what this does is that it starts from the right side to the side that you have not finished, and it works to the left side, where you start. And if it is able to move to a previous step, it will move to that previous step. If it can't, then it just sits there at the one that it can work on for you. So again, we already know that crafting select step 1, action 2, will make me 1 brick. And with one button, bam, we're making a brick. Now this next one, I'm just going to, hit some buttons, and I'm going to be progressing through it, and oh my goodness, complication. Now let me let you know right now that there are some problems with the macros in the game, and one of them right now is that you cannot use macros to clear complications. There is no command to do it. You still have to do it manually. So manually click and remove it, and bang, you're ready to go on and bang this out. I want you to notice that my mouse is staying still. It's right up here in the corner, and I'm going right on through these like it ain't no thing. Okay, now I just went through my tool actions, and I didn't switch between my tool belts. Being level of 55, I've got access to some items that give me some more slots in my toolbox, so I don't have to switch between them. At lower levels, unfortunately, there is no macro command to switch between your different toolboxes. You're going to have to manually adjust what tool belt you're using so that you can get through your tool actions, and you'll have to do that on your own, manually clicking them. So as we go through here, we're almost done. Our first utility. Now we're going to move on to our second utility, and then finally our finishing step. Now our finishing step allows me to demonstrate my one of the other macro commands I use, which I think is really easy to use, and it is the loot all. I'm a big fan of touch typing and macro commands, and I have my loot all command set up so that it automatically, boom, it loots it and it puts it in my bag. I don't have to click in it. I don't have to try and guess where that loot window is going to pop up. One button, done. Now, and moving on to the next. Okay. Now, this next command here, maybe you see it, crafting add secondary. Now, one of the countless things that crafters run into while they're making their items is that they forget to add their enhancement dust or their crystal or whatever it is. As you can see, if I open up my crafting and my sandstone block right here, it'll say that I can add an attuning powder. And I put the attuning powder on the table and I'm going through my crafting and I forget to add the powder when the little button comes up that allows me to put it on the item. Now, if I have this macro command right here, crafting add secondary, anytime I put that into the computer and send it to the server knows to add that enhancement. And I can do that anytime after that button has appeared, and it will add it, even though that button's no longer there. Now, I really kind of simplify the process because I add that command to every single macro for my action steps and for my actions and my steps. And so what my real macros look like is this right here. You can see up at the top, crafting add secondary, and then the crafting select, and then the steps 8 through 1, and then crafting select action 1 or 2 or 3, whatever it is. So when I'm crafting and I'm going on through my progress, I don't ever have to worry about remembering to add the attuning dust or the resonating dust to complete the item. My macros automatically add it every time that button comes up. I don't even have to think about it. Now, one of the drawbacks to that is that I'll get an error message over in my chat window that says you can't execute a crafting action now. But honestly, I'd rather have the little error message that I would have than I would rather have that error message pop up, than have made an item and forget to add the attuning dust. So that just about wraps up all the different macro commands that I use. But I want to talk to you really quickly about key bindings. As you can see, in Vanguard, you're given access to 10 different home rows that you can add for hotbars. And when I log into Jarl, I know that Jarl, on his second hotkey, he has his macro commands all set up on both the first row and then the second upper row. They're all on basically the second selection that he can have. Now, on this upper row, I have the keybinds of A, S, and D set up to, select the recipe, which is my D key, and then my A key is the add the utilities, and then the S key is my loot all command. And you can do that by going into Settings in your main menu, and then over to Controls, and then you scroll down, and it is secondary hotkey 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 is that second bar right here. And again, you can see I have A, S, D, F, G, H all on that second row. As a warning though, if you re-keybind A, S, and D to be your crafting macro commands like I do, you will lose your keyboard turning abilities and your backup command to run backwards because you're going to keybind those commands to other actions. And that is a matter of personal preference. I choose to do it, and in a later video, my PvP video, I will explain why I think that that's a better way to do things. You don't have to do it that way. If you want to keep your A and S and D to the movement commands, perhaps you can keybind those other commands to Z, X, or C, or maybe you can stretch them down to like 8, 9, or 10. All right. last thing is that I want to have a little message to the developers who might happen to be watching. As I have said, there are no macro commands to clear complications, and there are no macro commands to switch toolboxes. If either or both of those macro commands could be added to the game, I think that it would really add to it and make crafting a simpler process. Now, there are two other commands that I'd like to see added, just as a matter of preference. And the first one is a method of hailing, of talking to this shaping bench in front of me without actually having to click on it through a macro command. What I want is to be able to bring up this user interface right here without having to click on it through a macro command. And then the other thing I'd like to see is that if I begin talking and I select my recipe and I want to begin, I'd like to get away from having to click on this little begin icon right here, and I'd like to put it into my actual macro, refine set recipe Tannlin limestone brick, and then put on the next line down a command of execution that says I'm ready to begin, for both the selecting the recipe that I want to use, and then begin after I put all of my utilities, if there's add, my solvent, my cleaner, my emery, and then begin working on the progress automatically. I think that would greatly add to the game. Well, that about wraps it up for my crafting macro video. I hope that this hasn't been too hard to listen to. I'm a complete and utter rank beginner noob at this sort of thing, but I plan on doing more, and if you bear with me, I promise I will get better. This is Tannlin from Tannlin's Take blog. Thank you.